It was September 10th, 2023, around 8:30 p.m. I'd just finished a stressful day at work and decided to go for a bike ride to clear my head. The trail I chose was a quiet one outside of Portland, Oregon, surrounded by thick woods. I'd ridden it plenty of times before. By the time I set out, the sun had just set, and the sky was that faint purple, just before full darkness. The trail was mostly deserted, which didn't bother me. I had my bike lights on, and the sound of my tires on the pavement was rhythmic, calming. About 10 minutes into the ride, I noticed something odd. A dark SUV parked just off the trail, partially hidden by trees. Its headlights were off, but I could hear the engine idling. I slowed down a little, glancing at the vehicle as I passed. No one was standing near it, and it seemed out of place. I thought it might be someone taking a break or on a phone call, but something about it unsettled me. 5 minutes later, I heard the unmistakable sound of a car starting to move. Glancing behind me, I saw the SUV pulling out from its spot, creeping along the road parallel to the bike trail. It wasn't driving fast enough to pass me, it was just keeping pace. My stomach tightened. I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe they were going the same way. But after another minute, it became clear. They weren't speeding up to overtake me. They were just following. My heart started to race, and I pedaled faster. Up ahead, the trail split. One path crossed a small bridge, while the other veered into the woods. I didn't think too much about it. I just turned into the woods, hoping to lose them. For a few moments, it was silent, except for the sound of my breathing and my tires crunching the dirt trail. Then I heard it. Footsteps. At first, I thought it was just the wind rustling the leaves. But no, these were deliberate steps, moving quickly through the trees. I glanced over my shoulder and saw him. A figure in dark clothes, moving between the trees, heading straight for me. He wasn't running, but he was fast. Too fast. There was no way he could have gotten there unless he'd been waiting or watching me. I had no idea how he'd followed me so quickly. I pushed myself harder, but the trail was rougher here, with roots and rocks slowing me down. The footsteps were getting closer, matching the pace of my tires. I reached for my phone in my pocket, but my hands were shaking too much to unlock it. Suddenly, my front tire hit a patch of gravel, and I lost control. I skidded and crashed to the ground, scraping my knee and elbow. Pain shot through my leg, but I forced myself up, grabbing my bike. That's when I saw him again, closer now, emerging from the trees just a few yards away. He wore a hood, his face partially hidden, but in the dim light, I caught a glimpse of something shiny in his hand. It was a knife. Panic surged through me. Without thinking, I abandoned my bike and ran, ignoring the pain in my leg. I could hear him getting closer, his footsteps loud and heavy behind me. Just when I thought he was going to catch up, I saw headlights on the trail ahead. A pickup truck was approaching, its lights cutting through the darkness. I waved my arms frantically, shouting for help. The truck slowed down, and I ran to the driver's side, pounding on the window. The driver, an older man, looked startled but unlocked the door. I scrambled inside, gasping, "Someone's following me." The man looked back down the trail, but when I turned to check, the figure was gone. The trees were still, the woods silent. He offered to drive me back into town, and I didn't argue. I left my bike behind, not caring about it anymore. As we drove away, I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see that shadowy figure appear again. But all I saw were the empty woods, disappearing behind us. The next day, I reported the incident to the police. They searched the area but found nothing. No sign of the SUV, no trace of the man in the woods. It was like they had vanished. I went back a few days later, and my bike was still there, rusting on the side of the trail. I never found out who that man was or what he wanted, but every time I think about the sound of his footsteps behind me, the glint of that knife, a cold shiver runs down my spine. I've lived in a small town in Colorado for as long as I can remember. Life here is slow-paced, the air is fresh, and it's perfect for bike rides. Work can be stressful, so cycling after work has become my favorite way to relax. I usually ride in the evenings, and with the cool autumn air, it's the best time to unwind. There's a highway on the outskirts of town that I often ride along. It's quiet and scenic, though a bit isolated. That day, I finished work later than usual. The sun was already setting, but I didn't want to miss my ride, so I grabbed my bike and headed out. The highway I chose runs through farmland, and there's rarely much traffic, which is exactly why I like it. The sky was dimming, and a light breeze rustled through the fields. I started pedaling faster, hoping to make it home before it got too dark. After a while, I noticed a white van parked on the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking. It was half on the road, half off, positioned awkwardly. The van seemed abandoned. There was no sign of anyone inside. I didn't think much of it as I passed, figuring the driver had stopped for some reason. A few minutes later, I heard the low hum of an engine behind me. I glanced back and saw that the white van had started moving, following me at a slow pace. At first, I wasn't concerned. Maybe the driver was just getting back on the road. But then, after a minute or so, I realized something strange. It wasn't trying to overtake me. The van was simply trailing me, maintaining a steady distance behind, almost as if it were watching me. I kept riding, trying not to think too much of it. But the van didn't change its speed. It continued to shadow me, and the unsettling feeling in my chest began to grow. I decided to slow down, hoping the van would pass me. But instead of speeding up, it also slowed down, keeping the same eerie distance between us. At that point, I started to feel truly uneasy. My pulse quickened as I weighed my options. I didn't want to stop, but I also didn't want to keep riding with this van creeping behind me. Something wasn't right. My first instinct was to speed up, so I did. I pressed down hard on the pedals and accelerated, hoping to leave it behind. But the van sped up too, matching my pace. The engine's low, rumbling hum filled the empty stretch of road, its presence becoming more and more oppressive. I began to panic. This was no coincidence. I glanced back again. Those headlights were still there. Not too far, not too close, but always there, following me. I realized I needed to lose this van. Up ahead, I spotted a narrow dirt road, one that cut through the farmland. It wasn't meant for cars, just a path used by tractors, and it was bumpy and uneven. I turned sharply onto it, thinking that there was no way the van could follow me on such a narrow, rough trail. For a moment I thought I'd made the right move. The road was dark, with tall trees on either side casting long shadows. I pedaled harder, trying to calm myself. But after a few minutes, something happened that I still can't explain. Ahead of me, two beams of light appeared, headlights. The same white van slowly emerged from another side path, blocking the way ahead. My heart pounded. How was this possible? There was no way it could have known where I'd gone, let alone get there so quickly. It was as if it had been waiting for me. Fear gripped me. The van had no reason to be on this dirt path, and yet here it was, moving toward me in that same slow, deliberate way. I realized I wasn't just being followed, I was being hunted. I turned my bike around and sped back the way I came, not caring about the bumps and holes in the road. I could feel my heart racing, the pressure mounting as I tried to outpace the van. The eerie glow of its headlights cast long, haunting shadows behind me, closing in with every second. I thought about calling the police, but when I fumbled for my phone, my hands were shaking too much to even dial. At that moment, I heard the van's engine roar to life. It had sped up. I dropped my phone and focused entirely on pedaling. I could hear the van getting closer, the lights brighter, the engine louder, as if it was about to plow right into me. Suddenly, up ahead, I spotted the lights of a gas station. Relief washed over me like a wave. I pushed myself harder, forcing my tired legs to keep moving, and sprinted toward the station. Just as I reached the safety of its lit parking lot, the van's headlights flickered off, and the engine went silent. It had disappeared back into the darkness, just as mysteriously as it had appeared. I stumbled off my bike, panting and drenched in sweat. My hands were trembling as I tried to catch my breath. Looking back at the road, it was empty. No sign of the van, no sound of its engine, nothing. It was as if it had never been there at all. I stayed at the gas station for a long time, too afraid to get back on the road. Even now, I can't explain what happened that night. Why had that van followed me so persistently, and how had it known where I was going? The memory of its headlights in the dark still sends chills down my spine. To this day, I avoid that highway at night. I never want to see that white van again. One evening, like many others, I decided to go for a ride on my bike through the outskirts of the city. It was a peaceful Friday night in Portland. The air was cool and crisp, and there were hardly any cars on the road. These solitary moments gave me a sense of calm and freedom, a much-needed break from the stresses of the week. That night, after dinner, I chose a route I didn't usually take, a quiet, narrow road that cut through a forested area. By day, it was a popular spot for cyclists, but at night, it was almost completely deserted. The further I went, the darker it became. My bike light illuminated just a few feet ahead, and everything around me was swallowed by darkness. The stillness in the air was almost unnerving. After about 30 minutes of riding, I saw an old beat-up pickup truck on the side of the road. Its hood was up, and the headlights flickered weakly. A man was standing next to it, wearing a heavy jacket, his head down, seemingly inspecting the engine. "Hey man, can you help me out?" He suddenly waved when he saw me approaching. His voice was sharp, almost urgent, but something about the situation didn't feel right. This road was so isolated, and if his car was really broken down, why hadn't he called a tow truck? I slowed down, hesitating. I didn't want to leave someone stranded, but there was an uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. As I coasted closer, I noticed something odd. A large wooden club was sticking out from the back seat, carelessly tossed as if it had just been used. The interior of the truck was a mess, cluttered with junk. What struck me even more was the man himself. His eyes were shifty, darting between me and the truck as if he was waiting for something. His forced smile and nervous energy only amplified the dread crawling over me. "Car trouble?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady while my instincts screamed at me to leave. Instead of answering, he kept fiddling with the engine, glancing at me out of the corner of his eye. The fake grin never left his face. Then, out of the shadows on the far side of the truck, I saw another man step forward. He had the same kind of jacket on, but his expression was much worse, a cold, unsettling smirk. They exchanged a quick glance, and I instantly realized I was in danger. This wasn't a broken-down car. This was a trap. "Sorry, I have somewhere to be," I blurted out, turning my bike back toward the road. Before I could even finish my sentence, I heard one of them yell, "Don't let him go!" My heart pounded in my chest as I slammed my feet onto the pedals, racing away as fast as I could. I didn't dare look back. My legs burned, but the fear was stronger. Their footsteps grew louder for a moment, and then I heard them fading away as I pulled ahead. I thought I had managed to escape, but the threat was far from over. As I sped down the road, I could hear the quiet hum of a car engine behind me. I glanced over my shoulder and saw that the pickup truck had somehow roared to life. Its headlights blazed, and the engine revved, bearing down on me fast. My brain went blank with terror. How had they gotten it working so quickly? The truck was gaining on me, the roar of its engine filling the night air. I had to push harder. I could feel the truck closing in, its headlights casting my shadow long and distorted on the pavement ahead. There was no one else around, no other cars, no houses, just me and that truck. But then in the distance, I saw a faint glow, the lights of the main street. Safety. I gritted my teeth, forcing every last ounce of strength into my legs as the truck sped closer and closer. Just a little further, I told myself. Just a few more seconds. Finally, I burst out into the lit street. The sudden brightness was a relief. I could see the familiar outlines of buildings and a 24-hour convenience store up ahead. The truck's headlights flickered off, and the engine went silent. They weren't going to follow me into the populated area. I didn't slow down until I reached the front of the store. Jumping off my bike, I hurried inside, my chest heaving with each breath. The store clerk gave me a puzzled look, asking if I needed help, but all I could do was shake my head. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and dialed 911. The police arrived not long after. I recounted the whole incident to them, every detail. They went to check the road where the pickup had been, but by then, the truck and those two men were long gone. The officer told me it was likely a group of drifters, possibly planning to rob people passing through remote areas like that one. I had been lucky to escape. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the truck's headlights in the dark, the men's faces, and that smirk that seemed to linger in my mind like a nightmare. I was grateful I had trusted my instincts, but it was a terrifying reminder of how close I had come to something far worse. Since that night, I haven't gone for another solo night ride. The streets of Portland may seem calm and quiet, but there's no telling what could be waiting in the shadows. That's today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notification bell. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.